Talking about the Battle of Waterloo, fought in 1815. It's a clash of titans, an absolute tactical masterclass, and above all, a story of desperate survival.
It's pretty wild when you step back and think about it. How does a guy go from a decade of total, absolute dominance over the European continent to a humiliating island exile, and then boom, straight into the bloodiest showdown of the 19th century? The whiplash is just incredible. One minute, the map of Europe is being redrawn in peace, and the next, the continent is plunged right back into total war.
Section 1. The Emperor Strikes Back. So to really get the urgency of this whole situation, we've got to start by looking at the crazy geopolitical tension of April 1814. Things moved blindingly fast. Napoleon is forced to abdicate by a massive coalition of his enemies and shipped off to this tiny island called Elba. The Bourbon monarchy is restored, but, well, the French people aren't exactly thrilled. Rumors of this unrest make their way to Napoleon, and after just 10 months, he literally just slips away. He sails back to France, and get this, the very troops sent to arrest him, they actually rally to his side. It's like something out of a movie. Over in Vienna, the coalition completely drops their bickering, declares him an outlaw, and starts mobilizing. Napoleon knows he can't wait around. He has to streak first before this massive coordinated invasion force just totally flattens him.
Which brings us to Section 2, Divide and Conquer. The million-dollar question here is, how on earth did Napoleon plan to beat an enemy that massively outnumbered him?
He needed a masterstroke, and his grand strategy was actually brilliant. He decides to target the coalition armies within easiest reach, the ones camped out in Belgium. Here's the thing, Napoleon's army was tough enough to beat either of those armies in a one-on-one fight. But if Prince Blücher's Prussians and the Duke of Wellington's Anglo-Allied army ever managed to join forces, game over. He'd be completely crushed. So, the plan is simple but risky. Drive a giant wedge right between them and pick them off one by one.
And at first, it actually works. At the Quatre Bras crossroads, Wellington's guys are scrambling and barely manage to hold their ground against the French left wing. Meanwhile, over at Ligny, Napoleon gets into this brutal slugfest with the Prussians and actually wins. Get this, the Prussian commander, Prince Blücher, who is 72 years old, personally leads a cavalry charge. His horse gets shot right out from under him, and he barely escapes being captured. The Prussians are forced to retreat, but, and this is absolutely crucial, they aren't broken. When Wellington hears about this, he falls back through these torrential summer rainstorms to a gentle ridge just south of Brussels, near a little village called Waterloo.
Now look at the sheer mismatch here. Wellington is smart. He hides his guys behind a gentle ridge to shield them from cannon fire. The opposing armies are roughly the same size, but look at who Wellington is commanding. It's a total ragtag mix of British, Dutch, and German troops. Many of them have literally never seen combat before. So you've got these green, untested troops desperately trying to hold the line against Napoleon's unified, hardcore veterans. They just have to survive until the Prussian reinforcements show up. If they break, the war is lost.
Section 3, the Battle of Waterloo. Sunday morning rolls around bright and fair, and the clock officially starts ticking. You can really see how the tension builds throughout the day here. Napoleon actually makes a super critical call early on. He delays his attack to let the muddy ground dry out. I mean, it makes sense. It makes moving troops and heavy cannons a lot easier. But man, those lost hours, they end up costing him dearly. Once the fighting finally kicks off around 11 a.m., it's just this grueling, hour-by-hour pendulum swing of momentum on the battlefield. Wellington later called this the decisive moment of the battle. He was talking about the defenders at Hougoumont. Basically, Napoleon ordered a fake-out attack on this fortified farmhouse on Wellington's right flank, hoping to pull Allied troops away from the center. But the British and German defenders there were incredibly stubborn. At one utterly terrifying point, the French actually smashed their way through the main gate, but the defenders somehow managed to heave it shut right behind them, trapping the intruders inside, and, well, slaughtered them all. It was an unbelievable display of grit. The sheer chaos of that afternoon is just hard to wrap your head around. Around noon, 80 French cannons start blasting massive, bloody holes in the Allied lines. Then comes a huge French infantry charge, which gets broken up by British heavy cavalry. But then the British cavalry gets way too fired up, they charge way too far into enemy lines, their horses get totally gassed, and they just get decimated by a French counterattack. They even lose their commander, Major General Sir William Ponsonby. Then, fast forward to 4 p.m. French Marshal Ney mistakenly thinks the Allies are retreating, so he launches this colossal cavalry charge. But the Allied infantry?
They're completely ready. They form up into these super tight, hollow squares with their bayonets sticking out like porcupines. Ney's cavalry literally can't touch them. They just circle around helplessly, getting picked off from their saddles. Sending cavalry against infantry squares without any backup? Yeah, a totally disastrous blunder.
Section 4. The Imperial Guard breaks. By 6 p.m., things are at an absolute boiling point for everybody.
The French finally managed to take this farmhouse called La Haye Sainte, right smack in the middle of the battlefield. This is a massive headache for Wellington. It means the French can drag their artillery up close and just blast those tightly packed Allied squares from point-blank range. Casualties are stacking up incredibly fast. It really looks like Wellington's army is just going to be wiped out where they stand. But right at that moment, Blücher's Prussians finally start arriving, and they immediately threaten a village on Napoleon's flank. Running totally out of men, and more importantly, out of time, Napoleon goes for one final desperate gamble.
He turns to his ultimate trump card. At 7:30 p.m., 3,000 of the most terrifying soldiers in Europe, the elite, battle-hardened veterans of the Imperial Guard, march straight across a totally corpse-strewn battlefield right at the Allied center. But as they get close, Wellington's redcoats stand up and unleash these absolutely devastating volleys of musket fire right into their faces. And then the unthinkable happens. For the very first time ever, the Imperial Guard wavers, and then they actually retreat. The psychological blow of this is massive. Seeing their invincible guard running away, plus hearing that the Prussians are flanking them, it sparks total, uncontrollable panic. The French army simply breaks and runs for it. Only Napoleon's old guard stays behind, fighting a doomed, heroic rearguard action.
It's a complete and total rout. Napoleon literally has to ditch his carriage and barely escapes the Prussian cavalry chasing him down. The battle is decisively over. A bit later, the Duke of Wellington and Prince Blücher meet up to celebrate outside the inn that had been Napoleon's headquarters. The inn happened to be named La Belle Alliance, the Beautiful Alliance. Blücher thought, hey, perfect name for our shared victory. But Wellington, he preferred the much more English-sounding name of his own headquarters, and that was Waterloo. A damned near-run thing. That iconic quote from the Duke perfectly hits the nail on the head. This wasn't some easy, guaranteed win. It really highlights how dangerously close the coalition lines came to just totally collapsing, and how the entire outcome of the war hung by a thread right up until the very last minute. Section 5. The Cost of Peace. So, the strategic victory was secured, but we really need to step back and look at the horrifying toll of just this one day of combat. These numbers are just staggering. Waterloo is easily one of the bloodiest battles of the entire era. We're talking roughly 50,000 men killed or wounded in just a matter of hours. That's 23,000 on the coalition side and 27,000 French soldiers. And it's a super grim reality that really grounds all these brilliant tactical maneuvers we've been talking about. The sheer scale of the carnage completely overwhelmed the rudimentary medical pair of 1815. Because of that, thousands of wounded men just had to be left out there lying in the muddy battlefield for days. The political fallout, though, was absolute. Napoleon was utterly defeated. With an exhausted France unable to give him yet another army, he surrendered to the British. And this time, they took no chances. They shipped him off to St. Helena, which is this tiny, remote rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. There was zero chance of escaping this second exile. He died there 6 years later. Taking him off the board for good completely paved the way for a massive shift in European geopolitics. 40. That is the number of years of relative peace between the great European powers that directly followed Waterloo. The entire balance of power was reset, and amazingly, the British wouldn't fight another major war on the continent for almost an entire century, all the way up until the summer of 1914. But you know what really brings this all home for us today? 40 years after the smoke cleared, pioneers in this brand new thing called photography took pictures of surviving veterans from Napoleon's armies. Men like Sergeant Tanya from the Imperial Guard, Moret of the Hussars, and Verline of the Guard Lancers. Seeing these photos of guys in their 70s and 80s, still wearing their original uniforms, it's just this incredible direct visual link. It totally bridges the gap between a distant historical epic and our modern world. It is profoundly moving to look into the eyes of the guys who actually stood in those fields. I really hope this explainer brought this dramatic turning point to life for you, breaking down all the crazy tactics, the lucky breaks, and just the sheer unyielding grit of that Sunday in 1815. Looking at these faces, I want to leave you with this thought. When we study grand maps and sweeping strategies of empires, how often do we stop and truly weigh the human blood spent to draw the borders of our modern world?
Keep that in the back of your mind next time you look at a map of Europe.